Welcome to the culture. Hello to the YouTubes! I went to Game of Thrones wedding and here is what happened! Grab a cup of tea because this might be a long story, but it's worth telling because it was amazing. My character was called Alison Hogg of So's Horn. So's Horn is a little tower in the Crownlands and that's where she grew up. She learned all the ways of a good Westerosi lady. There she learned pretty quickly that she had nothing much to look forward to in the future, except getting married and being a lord's lady. She was pretty okay with that, because she didn't know anything else, until her father died in Robert's Rebellion. Her older brother Roger became the new Lord of So's Horn and decided to marry his mother off to a Dornish trader. So the mother and the two younger daughters, Alison and Emma, were shipped off to Planky Town. And for Alison that was a good thing. Dorne showed her a new way of life, where a woman could be so much more than just a lady. Not only were they allowed to love whoever they wanted to love, and how many people they wanted to love, but they also were allowed to make choices and be free and fight if they wanted to. It was very different, but Alison loved it. Her sister, however, didn't. She wanted to be the Crownland lady that she grew up to be. She wanted to find a proper husband and be a good wife. So the two girls grew apart. They still got along, kind of, but they weren't as close as they used to be. One day, their stepfather, Quentin Sand, took them to a business trip to the mountains, where they met the house Dane of High Hermitage and the bastards called the Mountain Lions. Alison was actually supposed to marry Lord Peyton, Dane of High Hermitage, but the arrangements didn't go so well. So they kind of had to leave empty-handed, almost, because something happened before they left. Lord Peyton's older sister, Alyssa, gave Alison a kiss. A really lovely, lovely kiss. And in love, Alison fell, and she fell hard. But she had to leave, and Quentin didn't take her to any other business trips, so the chance of meeting this lady again looked slimmer by the day. Especially when they got message from Roger to come back to the Crownlands. At this point they had lived in Planky Town for 5 years, and it became Alison's home, and she didn't want to go back to Westeros. Well, to the north of Westeros. She didn't want to be in the Crownlands, she didn't want to be home, she didn't want to be with her brother, she didn't want to become a lady, but she had no choice. So her and her sister went back. After they've spent about half a year back in So's Horn, they got an invitation to a wedding from Lord Craighall. Lord Craighall was meant to marry a Dornish lady, and this seemed to be like a good opportunity to marry off both Emma and Alison to suitable husbands, and hopefully ones that didn't come from Dorne, because Roger was not a fan of Dorne. Oh no. And Alison was not a fan of the idea of going to a Crownland wedding. But they did. And she was pissed. Until she saw who came with the bride to this wedding. Once they arrived at the castle, she saw them. Lord Peyton and Lady Alyssa, Dane of High Hermitage, and the Mountain Lions. And suddenly this wedding didn't seem so horrible anymore. Well, if it wasn't for her brother keeping a very, very close eye on her. Alizon tried to convince him that it would only be the right thing to do to introduce themselves to these Dornish lords, seeing as they were acquainted with their stepfather. But Roger wasn't about that life. They introduced themselves to Lord Craighall and then they stood around, doing nothing. Alizon tried to get away, but he wasn't very successful. But then there was a fire show, kind of as a welcoming gift to the lords and ladies, and Alizon saw the opportunity and took it. She moved further away from her brother and closer to Lady Alyssa by getting a better view on the fire show. And first contact was made, and it was clear that between the two ladies there was still a lot of passion, at least, if not love. It was kind of cute, because Alizon, with this big mouth who would never shut up, sat next to the lady not knowing what to say, and the lady Alyssa was so confident. But it didn't take long until she was dragged away again and told off by her brother. And then the evening progressed. Lord Craighall invited all the lords and ladies to come into the dining hall. And boy, was that a dinner! It was a room full of noblemen, and no one talked. And when someone tried to talk, the conversation was dull and dry and kind of awkward. And Alizon had never been as bored in her life. The only little glimmer of hope was a bard, who was in the dining hall singing his songs, and she really liked what he was doing. He also liked his snarky remarks, so they started whispering. Again, not something Roger and Emma particularly agreed to. But Alizon made friends where she wanted to make friends, and most of the times those were people beneath her status. And then suddenly the mood switched. Some guards came running into the dining hall, looking very anxious, out of breath, and started whispering to the lord. Alizon got intrigued. She excused herself to go to the toilet, trying to get a look at what was happening out there, but her sister sensed it and followed her. But Alizon was having none of that, so she started running out of the dining hall, out of the castle, and just away from her sister. She ended up in the juggler's camp and hid in the shadows when a guard carried a dead body past her. And there was talk of another one. A juggler girl had died, as well as one of the men from the Iron Islands. No one knew what was happening. There was a lot of screaming, a lot of running around and drama, and then the guards found Alizon hidden right next to the scene of the crime. First they accused her, then they were just confused. She made up some excuses and they let her back into the castle. Her brother was not happy about what had happened at all. Like, not at all. So he started screaming at her in the middle of the castle. It was nice. Everyone looked and stared and judged, but Alizon kind of blocked it off. She told him that he had no right to tell her what to do and that she could make her own choices, and just because he was her brother, he wasn't the lord of her, and it didn't go well. It also didn't help that more people were poisoned or attacked and accusations were thrown around. It was a tense night. Some people even started accusing Alizon of poisoning one of the Night's Watchmen, but why would she do that? She had no motive, so they kind of dropped it. So Alizon kind of calmed down and spent the rest of the evening making friends with the bard and a lady who was traveling with him called Camilla. Camilla and Alizon actually became really close and spent a lot of time together. But the evening calmed down, the dead were carried away, and people started going to bed. And Alizon was also ready to lay down and call it a night when her sister suddenly approached her with a letter she had gotten. The letter wasn't of much interest, but her sister said that there was a secret message and she needed her help. So while Emma put the letter to a candle, Alizon stood watch. The secret message said something like, "Give this to your brother. Thank you, Varys." Yeah, that Varys. So Alizon was like, "What letter? What's happening? I'm very confused." And Emma showed her a sealed letter that she was supposed to give to Roger. The girls decided that if they gave this letter to Roger, he wouldn't tell them what was inside. So the sneaky little girls decided to open the seal carefully with a plan to just reseal it the next morning. The letter was from a Lannister telling Roger about a bard called Eugene, who wrote a very horrible song about the Lannisters and had to be punished. If Roger at any time came across this Eugene bard, he would have to hand him over. At this point, Emma and Alison were both close to Eugene and didn't want anything bad to happen, so they spent the rest of the night discussing what they would do, coming to the conclusion that they had to give the letter to their brother, but that they also had to warn Eugene and give him the chance to run away before the Lannisters came to hurt him. The next morning started in more drama. The Lord Craighall, the groom, had been poisoned and was in a coma. His soon-to-be wife seemed relatively chill about it. A little bit too chill, maybe. But no one knew what was happening. Most of the morning was spent with talks. A lot of talks. And some things came to the surface. First of all, the people that died the night before were part of a Targaryen conspiracy. The Targaryens were dead, everyone knew that, and yet people still seemed to follow them. Also, news arrived at the castle that King Robert Baratheon and his lovely wife Cersei had a second child, a young boy called Tommen. About the letter, the girls did warn Eugene. Emma gave the letter to Roger, but nothing much came of it. Eugene said he couldn't leave until tonight, there was something else he had to do. Wouldn't tell us what it was, but he was thanking Alison for helping him and offering her to run away together. But they were still Alisa, and Alison tried to get close to her. It was hard because her brother was kind of creepy and the mountain lions weren't as nice as Alison thought they would be, even though they were Dornish. It was all a bit strange. Also, people suddenly started to ask around for a guy called Ali Sand, who apparently put his name on the tournament list, but no one knew who it was. Well, Alison. Coincidence? Well, some people picked up on it, but no one could really believe that a lady would enter a tournament. Before the tournament actually happened, Alison met another friend, a juggler, who was accused of the Targaryen conspiracy. He was beaten up and then banned from the castle. So was Eugene, by the way, for I don't even know what, but both of them were locked out of the castle. She paid one of the handmaidens to steal some armor and weapons for her, and she dressed up as a mysterious knight. And she entered the tournament. Alison was standing in the back with his helmet on, and people turned around, whispered, and everyone was wondering who was this Alison, this mysterious knight. She entered the tournament, won the first fight, got into the finale against the visor of the Dornish people. He was a shady dude who had his hands in everything. He made deals with everyone, and everyone came to make deals with him, and he had power over everyone. And he was standing there in front of her in the finale, and he was a damn good fighter. So they started fighting. It didn't look well for Alison, and then he slipped. He slipped, fell on the floor. She jumped on top of him and headbutted him with her helmet, knocking him out, which meant she won the tournament. What she didn't know at this point was that the visor had made a deal with everyone to lose against him and also lose against her. He knew it was her. But still, she won the tournament. And then people were like, "Who are you? Reveal your face!" So she took off the helmet, and there she was, a lady with a sword in her hand and blood on her face. Everyone started freaking out. Some people were super excited, like the bride jumped up, ran towards her and gave her a kiss. And Alison was flabbergasted, like she didn't know what to do. She just stood there, raising her sword, looking super confident. They then handed over the flower crown that she was supposed to give to the most beautiful lady. So she went to Lady Alyssa, put the flower crown on her hand, and then the argument started. "You can't let a lady win. This is not in the rules. A lady can't win a tournament." Everyone screamed and shouted, and it was a whole mess. And then suddenly Roger stood up. Alison's brother, Roger. And he said this was a disgusting fight. This was horrible to see. This is not okay. but my sister won this tournament. And then everyone went quiet. The bride declared me the official winner, and Alizan went out of this with a huge fucking new sword and a lot of pride and freedom and happiness. After that, things started changing. Her brother accepted her, let her have her freedom. Her sister actually cut off all her hair. The other girls swarmed her, admiring her for being so brave and taking her own stand, and they all decided to gain back power and not be just ladies anymore, and it was so great. And actually it helped with getting closer to Lady Alyssa. She offered Alizan a position as her handmaiden in Dawn. It was more a way for them to be able to be together in Dawn. Everything just started falling into place. She only wore her armor now and a turban and her sword. She didn't go back to the lady dresses. Like, she was done with that. She was done with pretending to be someone else. Some people made fun of her and were like, oh, what are we supposed to call you now? Lady or lord or sir, or what are you? And she was just like, just call me Alizan. I don't care if I'm a lady or a lord. I'm just me. It was a good time. She spent a lot of the day protecting her new best friend Camilla from her crazy uncle who suddenly showed up trying to kill him unsuccessfully, and people died a lot, but Alizan wasn't really affected by any of that. She was just having the best time of her life, and suddenly everything just fell into place for her. But there was still something worrying her. Her new friend, the juggler, was still meant to go to the Night's Watch for being part of the Targaryen conspiracy, and she was so sure that he was innocent. She was so sure. So she talked to the bride, asked her what they could do to help him, and she was like, oh, it's already been arranged. We're gonna follow the Night's Watch, and after 2 days of traveling, we're gonna give them a lot of money, take the juggler with us, and go back to Dawn. So even that was cleared up. I mean, the wedding wasn't happening because the lord was still in a coma and the bride didn't seem to really want to do that. And some other crazy stuff went down. I mean, there was a Targaryen conspiracy, but all those political things didn't really bother her. Also, kind of Lord Peyton and Lady Alyssa became the masters of this castle. On the second night, they were the ones sitting in the dining hall calling the shots. And Lord Peyton was bored, so he asked for some entertainment. Alizan went off to find Eugene, who had run off, and brought him back. And then she decided there was a need for more entertainment, so she went to the place where the juggler was tied up and told him about that he would be saved, and that she kept her promise of saving him, and that he was requested to come into the castle. She freed him, and as a thank you, he kissed her. And Alizan realized that he wasn't just her friend. There was more there. And she quietly whispered that if only he wasn't a juggler, things could be so different and so easy. And then he revealed to her that he was actually a sand bastard, and he wasn't accepted by his mother yet, but there was a great chance that he would, if only he would go back to Dawn. So they actually got engaged and moved to Dawn, get him accepted by his family so he would be of a similar status to her, and they could actually get married, while she was still a handmaiden for Lady Alyssa, and she could be with both of them and be happy and loved and in Dawn and home, and everything would be wonderful. This night couldn't have gone any better. Like, she went to this wedding expecting nothing, and then all this came out of it. And she was so happy. So happy. But we can't forget that this is Game of Thrones. And this is not how things go in Game of Thrones. So she and the juggler went back into the castle after a while. But the Night's Watch wasn't happy to see the juggler there. So there was more shouting and fighting, and then the juggler was locked into the wine cellar, gone for the night. And it was kind of sad that they couldn't spend this night together, but you know, she would save him a few days later and it was okay. Now she went to talk to the Vizier about something. When they came back to the castle, they entered the dining hall together. not a lot of people were left. Most people had gone to bed by this point. The only people still sitting at the table were Lord Peyton, Dane of High Hermitage, another knight she became friends with called Lord Dobrick, Eugene, the bard, her sister, and a few other people. It was a weird mood in there, and as soon as they entered, everything grew quiet. Lord Peyton asked her and the Visor to step up next to him. He made Alizan sit down, and the Visor stood there, angry. Really, really angry suddenly. The mood was tense. Eugene realized this too. He put down his cup of wine and just said, "It's getting late, I should leave." Before he could, however, the Visor had walked around the table and reached him and just hit him in the stomach. Eugene fell to the floor and the Visor beat him up. Alizan moved up and wanted to help, but Lord Peyton just put his arm on her shoulder and pushed her back down in the chair. She watched her friend get beaten up, while Lord Peyton was just talking about how she had to get used to how things are handled in Dorne, and Eugene had not been loyal to the Visor and he had it coming. Emma went out with Eugene helping him, and Alizan was left alone with Lord Peyton and Lord Dobrick. While Lord Peyton talked to her, he offered her his wine. She took a sip. It tasted bitter, but nothing she wasn't used to. And he kept talking, his arm still on her shoulder, the mood still tense. He offered her another drink. This time, it was even more bitter. And he said that, Dornish wine is known for being a bit different, but this one is particularly different. Very, very bitter. So very bitter. And Alizan started coughing. First a little bit, so little that Sir Dobrick thought she was just choking on her wine. But when she wouldn't stop, he suddenly jumped up and ran to her aid. Her sister heard her coughing as well and ran back in, but it was already too late. They tried to get out of the dining hall, but Alizan fell to the ground. She was spitting up blood, and she was dying. The last words that Alizan spoke was Lord Dane. "Please warn my fiancé. Tell him not to go to Dorne with them, and tell him I love him." And then she died in her sister's arms. She was carried out, and that was it. The next morning, people were crying about her and other people who had died. The mood was horrible. The Lannisters were on their way. People started dying left and right. The bride died. The groom was still in a coma. My brother killed the commander of the guards for not protecting me. Emma and Roger managed to escape. So did Eugene. So did the Dornish people. At the end of the day, the only people left in the castle was the Maester, who wanted to stand his ground and not leave his home, a few of the handmaidens, and a lord in a coma. The wedding never happened. And that's the end of the story. That's how things go in Game of Thrones. The moment you think everything is going great, there's poison in your wine. It was amazing though! It was such a cool story, and I got to keep the sword, and it was so good. It was so good. And I want to give a shout out to the organizers of this lab. I was so skeptical because I had such bad experiences with German labs, and they brought it back. Like, I'm excited to be LARPing in Germany now. They put so much effort in. They cared so much about the plots they have written. The details they put in the characters, the details they put in everything. Like, they were fantastic, and the people I played with were so lovely, and it was such a good game, and I genuinely enjoyed it, even though I didn't think I would. And man, I'm sad it's over. But it was a perfect story, and I had so much fun. Thank you guys for watching this. These Storytime lab videos are the ones I really want to make. I hope it wasn't too long. I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know if you did or how to improve on this format, because I don't want to bore anyone, but I really like telling stories from LARPs, and I also really like listening to them. So if you have any constructive criticism, please send me a message or write me a comment. Also, please like this video, consider subscribing to me, and just have a wonderful day. I love you guys so much. Bye! Wieder Boss, ich will der Boss!